welcome to the Holy Smokes Podcast, a show about faith, friendship, fine tobacco, and drink. I'm Steve Reiter at Culebra Cigar Company in Ontario, California. Thank you, Matthew McDavid, for letting us hole up here in the boardroom. And I am with a Holy Smoke favorite, Kyle Mann, Editor-In-Chief at the Babylon Bee. Kyle, thanks for being on, man.
Yeah, thanks for meeting up for cigars and chatting.
What's funny is there was an episode of the Babylon Bee podcast where I heard Ethan mention his love of cigars. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got it.
Yeah.
I posted it out to the group. I said, who knows the guys at the Bee? And there were a couple guys that introduced me to you. Mm-hmm. But because I didn't hear you mention anything about cigars, I was like, okay, I'm gonna talk to Ethan and then Ethan gets here and he's like, yeah, Kyle loves cigars too. I'm like, what?
Yeah, we could have.
I would have gotten you both on.
I am more casual. You know, if I have a couple cigars, I start to feel a little shaky. If Ethan doesn't have a couple cigars, he starts to feel a little shaky. So I love the hanging out, chatting with people.
Yeah.
And it just slows you down a little bit, you know. But he's definitely more of the, like if I go to his house, he's like, you want a cigar? He's got a whole collection. He's got the room, you know. I'm more of a once-in-a-while guy, but he's trying to rope me in, you know. So he's a bad influence. That's what it is.
All right, so first question, what you smoking?
I've got a Brick House Maduro here. I like these because they're like under $10. And
yeah. Well, especially with the California tobacco taxes that jack up the prices here.
Yeah, I guess I'm speaking in a California context. It's probably $5 in other states, but yeah, Brick House is good. I like I said, you know, I'm not super adjusted to see. I've been smoking them for years, but just on a once in a while basis. So, you know, that giant stick that you have over there, you know, I'd be throwing up by the end of the podcast here.
And the giant stick that he is referring to is a CAO Flathead 770, which is the big one. And yeah, this is a commitment for a conversation.
See, I'm planning on getting out of here in 15 minutes. That's why I have this one.
So you're a California kid?
Yeah.
Born and raised here?
Yeah, I grew up in Chino.
Okay.
Which is just
not
over the
that far
freeway
from
there.
here.
And it's a little farm town kind of, but it was blowing up into a suburb, and you know now it's a pretty big suburb of LA.
Yeah.
I grew up there. I went to school at the Masters University up in Santa Clarita, and then I went down to I moved down to San Diego for a few years, and moved back up here. So I'm back.
So what sort of work did you do after school?
It was kind of crazy. I went to school for 2 years, and then I went into the construction industry. And I was doing sales for a waterworks distributor.
Yeah.
So we sold pipe, valves, and fittings to utilities and underground contractors.
Yeah.
So all the water main and all that kind of stuff. And it was crazy, high stress, very fast-paced.
Yeah. So I can imagine with all the construction that's been going on here in Southern California.
Yeah, I got lucky when I joined because they basically stopped hiring after me because that's right when the economy died.
Oh, really?
And,
how old are you?
I'm 32.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was 2007.
Yeah.
I got hired and then got married a month later, and and it was kind of great. I kind of worked my way up. I was driving, delivering stuff, then I was managing the warehouse, and then I was entering orders, and then eventually I was the regional sales manager for San Diego, or one of the regional sales managers down there.
That's actually really fortunate to to get in right then, and have a job.
I would have been. I mean, if they started layoffs, I would have been the first to go. I mean, because I was,
last in.
But the company, was run by Mormons, and they were very people focused, so they wanted to keep everybody.
Yeah.
So they would cut the pay of the CEOs and the executive board before they started cutting people, which was great.
Wow.
It was really well managed business.
That's incredible.
Just a little family owned thing, and then when the economy started to pick up, it got that much crazier just in terms of time commitment. And I started writing for the Bee in 2016 part-time, go into the office, type up articles, and then start working. That was kind of that's what I did for a year or two.
So let's go back. What kind of home did you grow up in? In Chino.
I grew up in a Christian home, and I have three siblings, and it was a fun time. You know, my parents are great, and so just a really good upbringing. This is one of those boring testimonies where, you know, my parents weren't in prison or anything, so it's not very fun, not very spicy, but no, it was really good. A lot of what the Babylon Bee does is make fun of, you know, mega churches and American Christianity, Christian culture, and that was all stuff I experienced growing up. We went to a big mega church out here, and I'm sure it's not big by today's standards, but it was a couple thousand people on a Sunday, and so I kind of was immersed in that for 20 years, you know, and same church that whole time. And
what kind of church was it? It's
Pomona First Baptist.
Okay.
Which is
SBC?
I think now it's called Purpose Church or something, but it wasn't SBC. It was one of the more mainline Baptists, and they ended up breaking away from the main line because of the LGBT issues.
Yeah.
It was one of those that I think they're called, like, I'm going to mess it up, but Transform. They changed the denomination name to like Transform or something like that, and they were the ones who were siding with kind of a biblical view of marriage, so they broke away, which was good. You know, that was good on their part. So pretty good teaching for the most part, but definitely that ecclesiology where it was very, you know, big church and all the crazy stuff that goes along with that. So so that's kind of where my experience was. So when I started writing those kinds of articles for the Babylon Bee, it was incredible to me that I wasn't writing these going like, it wasn't like calculated, like this is a joke that everybody's going to get. You know, everybody knows. It was just for me, like, you know, like, but then it would take off and you would see that all these people all these American Christians had the same experience that I did, you know, and I didn't even know this was really a phenomenon.
Any siblings?
Yeah, I have three, and I have an older brother, and I have two younger sisters. And they're all local, which is kind of crazy, all of us being adults now and having families and being local.
You married, kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got 3 boys.
Nice.
Yeah, I got married in 2007, and February 2007, so I'm almost 13 years.
So you finish school, and then you get married, and you get a job all, like, pretty much within...
Yeah, it was like a month, yeah.
Holy catfish.
It was all within like a month, yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's nuts. So how old are your boys now?
They're, don't ask me that question on the spot. 3, 9, and 11.
Okay.
Yeah, the problem is that they all all their birthdays are around the same time, and so if you ask me that question right then, I'm trying to calculate like which one has already had their birthday, and which one hasn't yet. But I think right now we're good. 3, 9, and 11. So 3 boys. We're probably done. I mean, that's 3 boys is a handful. So
I grew up as the oldest of 3 boys, and so and I've got 2 sons, and so it's a culture that I'm quite familiar with.
Yeah.
So in 2016, you're working for this construction company. How do you find out about the Bee, and how do you get your foot in the door there?
Adam Ford had founded the Babylon Bee in March 2016. And it was an idea that was bugging him for a long time. This is something I need to do, you know.
Yeah.
And it was kind of in the back of his head all the time. Every time he read an Onion article, you know, it was like, this format is so effective at communicating something about what you believe. But it's communicating something that's often antithetical to what we believe. He's like, so I wish there was somebody that was doing that on our side. And there was some joke they did about one of the conservative Supreme Court justices, and I forget exactly what it was. And he always cites that one and says, I read that and I said, man, I wish I agreed with these people because this is very clever, you know.
Yeah.
And I still feel that way when I read Onion articles, right? Because it was something I disagree with because it's like, oh, that's funny. You're wrong, but that's funny, you know, that's very funny. And it really disarms people, you know.
Totally.
And so he wanted something like that on our side. Like, what if we had something that could really impact culture in a way, you know? And he didn't really think it was going to take off. Like how many of these things that people do, this is the Christian version of...
oh, yeah.
It's always crappy, you know, it's always terrible.
Yeah. I remember I graduated high school in '92, and that's when Christian metal really started to some good bands really started to kind of come on board, but there were still some just some garbage stuff, and I remember reading these magazines. This is a Christian version of Soundgarden, and this is a Christian version of Nirvana, and they sounded nothing like Soundgarden and Nirvana.
It's like the safe, tame, computer-generated version. My junior high group growing up, they had a big chart, like a big wall poster, and it was like, if you like, on the left side they had the secular bands, on the right side they had the... said, if you like these guys, try listening to Audio Adrenaline, or whatever. And then I think our junior high pastor even did a promotional thing where bring in your secular CDs and you can trade them for Christian CDs.
Oh, dear Lord.
Which is just, that was like, at the time I was all on board with it, right? Like,
totally, yeah.
I want to be a good Christian, and I want to, I want to be a good member of this church and do the right thing, but it created such a culture. It was almost a legalism thing at that point, right? Like,
totally.
Oh, you're listening to secular music? Obviously, there's some bad stuff out there in secular land, but, just because we're trying to avoid sinfulness doesn't necessarily mean we have to listen to bad music,
Yeah. So Adam so the Bees just starts to really fill this void.
Yeah, he launched it with 17 articles, I think, already written, and was kind of sprinkling those throughout the week. And then he posted a thing on Facebook. He already wrote a webcomic, so I was following him. And he posted a call for authors, and he didn't really know. I mean, he didn't think it was going to... Overnight, it became his main job. The comic took a back seat because it was so popular.
Well, I remember it just seemed to come out of nowhere. I think it was probably April, maybe May at the latest, in 2016, when I found out about it. For me, I was like, and I mentioned this on my interview with Ethan, I was like, yes! Because I grew up just north of Madison, Wisconsin, which, if you know anything about the history of the Onion, Madison is where the Onion was founded in the late, I think like 87, 88 was when the Onion was founded. And I remember stumbling onto it in May of 1992, seeing this newspaper at one of the shops on State Street, and just looking at the headline and just going, oh my gosh, I need to read this article, because it was so outlandish. I mean, I remember the Onion paper when it said in big, huge letters, Emperor of Saturn to enslave us all. And it was so good. Every time I went down to Madison, and when I lived in Madison, I would make sure to get my Onion for that week. And then when they went on the web, it was beautiful because it was something that I could follow when I moved to Colorado in '97.
Right.
And I watched the Onion be super funny, and then all of a sudden they started being less and less funny to the point where they're just mean at times. And for me, it was heartbreaking because this was a piece of my hometown where I grew up that I was like, wherever you grow up, you usually have some stuff that you're like super proud of because it's like, it's the home stuff. Right, like in Wisconsin, we got cheese curds and the Packers and whatever else. And people who've grown up in Wisconsin, like J.J. Watt, who go off into the NFL and have great careers. You're extra proud of that. Right. And so for me, it was like the Onion, yes. But then right around, it was 2012 to 2016, especially when Trump came around, that they just stopped being funny. And all of a sudden, you guys come out of nowhere, and it's like, yes! And you have a very similar worldview to where I came from, and the same Christian culture, and so I freaking loved it.
Yeah, it really connected, I think. It really filled a void where, especially because it was during the 2016 election, that Christians didn't know what to think about Trump, And here comes this Christian website that's willing to make jokes about Trump. But we're also willing to eviscerate the left, And it was just like, it really connected, with that. And with that, all the angst that people were feeling about the election. I hope that it really helped people to kind of calm down a little bit. Because there was all this worry, like Hillary Clinton's going to destroy us all, or Trump is whatever, I don't know. People thought he was the Antichrist. People thought Hillary Clinton was the Antichrist, So whatever side you were on, Christians felt so much worry about that election. So we kind of acted as a lightning rod for a lot of that.
So early on, Adam kind of throws it out there, hey, I need writers.
Yeah, and it blew up. Like, he got thousands of submissions, and he wasn't expecting to get thousands of submissions. So this was day one, and I sent in an article that was Holy Spirit unable to move through congregation as fog machine breaks.
So that was your first
That
one?
was my first one. I sent it in. I was like,
because I see that one pop up occasionally, kind of recycled.
Yeah, we'll repost it every year or whatever. And that was the first big viral. He posted it the second day the site went up. And it was the first big viral, and that's when Adam knew, this is going to be something, So he asked me to submit more, and I started sending in more. And within a couple of months, he kind of named me the head writer, which didn't really mean anything other than I sent in more articles than anybody else. But
yeah.
So it was just something that was so fun, for me, especially because I had such a high-stress job, working 50, 60 hours a week and being able to go on the side. And, as you're working, you're thinking of stuff, and you snap your fingers and go, that's it, and I'll text Adam an idea, hey, we got to do something on this, and we got to do something on that. And we worked really well together because he acted kind of as the filter, and I acted kind of as the engine behind a lot of the ideas, and then he would filter out my bad ideas from my good ideas. And every good writer has an editor like that,
Yeah.
That's my main struggle right now, is that I don't have a filter, because I write a lot of the content still, but I'm the editor. So I have to put on two different hats and go,
How hard is that for you to pull back from something that you just poured into and be like, that doesn't really cut it?
It depends on I think the hardest thing is figuring out, is this funny, or is this just funny to me? And sometimes if it's just funny to me, that's okay. I think it's all right. I think humor is better if you have a uniqueness to it,
Yeah.
If your site's confident enough to go, hey, we know nobody's going to like this, but here it is, and you're willing to lay it out there. I think I'm pretty good at knowing at least if something's going to be really controversial, and saying, there's too much controversy for this to be worth it to make the point it's trying to make, and then I'll be able to pull back and say, it's a funny idea, but we can't do that. So anyway, I was writing for Adam for a while, and then a couple years later, he sold the site, and I ended up taking over as the editor.
So what precipitated him selling the site?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy, because you think the super successful site, and you talk to anybody, you say, what's your dream job? It's like, running a satire site. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
For Adam, the stress became not worth it, because we were dealing with a lot of suppression issues on Facebook and other social networks, and with Snopes fact-checking us all the time, and that feeding into Facebook suppressing us. He grew really worried about that, about deplatforming, and he wanted
I guess right around that time, Milo was getting deplatformed, and Alex Jones was really getting pushed back.
Yeah, it was probably around that time. Maybe it was a little before Alex Jones, but that was a conversation it's still going on, but that was a conversation that was going on. And we actually got messages saying we would be deplatformed because Snopes fact-checked our jokes and said you're fake news, So that was one of his main issues that he was always worried about, is big tech censoring.
Yeah.
And so on a day-to-day basis, him getting up every morning and saying, are we going to have a job today, or is the site going to be down? And the main thing was that he didn't have the resources to fight it, And so he wanted to bring me on as the editor for a long time, or at least as a head writer, but he didn't want me to put my livelihood in that basket and then all of a sudden have it cut off, And we didn't have any other sources of income. It was, the Babylon Bee didn't have any other sources of revenue. It was all Google ads.
Yeah.
So if you get cut off from, 80% of traffic was from Facebook, So if you get cut off from Facebook, or Google ads cuts you off, you're done. You don't have any revenue. So we really needed someone with a business background who could turn it into something. Because as successful as it was, really the site paid for Adam to do it, to run it as a full-time job. It paid for me to do some part-time writing, and not much else. That was. It really is a struggle to make a web property profitable, even when they're really popular. So Seth Dillon is a Christian entrepreneur, and he bought the site in April of 2018. And he bought the site, and he brought he owns multiple web properties, so he had a really good understanding of, here's how we're going to make this profitable, And so he was able to hire me, and he's just been a great resource for us, Rebuilt the site from the ground up, all of that stuff. It's kind of interesting from a business perspective, that you can have a property that's so popular, but if you don't have the business background. It's like, how are you going to actually make money off this thing? You know, people can see hey, this Facebook post from the Babylon Bee got 50,000 shares. You know, that's awesome. But, you know, how are you going to monetize that? How are you going to turn that into something that you can live off, you know?
So what were the kinds of steps that Seth brought in to really help to kind of turn that corner so that way you could be hired full-time and
at first,
Ethan could be hired full-time?
I mean, at first nothing changed, you know. It was just I was running it instead of Adam. And we took almost a good year of just running it how it was. We tried a few different small things. We tried doing some sponsoring on Facebook and doing the ads and buying more followers, sponsoring the page to get more followers on Facebook. And it doesn't make it more profitable. You know, the way that Facebook works, they decide how many people are going to see your posts. It really doesn't matter how big your audience is, you know. I mean, past a certain point. So about a year in, he launched a subscription service where people can sign up and to support us. And that's the main pitch, is support comedy that you like. And you know, but there's some subscriber benefits and stuff, but that's the main pitch that we put out there. And that's been the biggest thing, I think, that Seth has done, because it's enabled us to bring Ethan on full time. We just brought on another guy who's producing our podcast and assisting us with writing. And so that has been the biggest thing. And, you know, that may be the way that a lot of websites have to go, is reader support, you know, because you can't really count on Facebook or Google to support a site like ours.
Well, holy smokers, full disclosure, I am a Babylon Bee subscriber. Kyle, why don't you talk about some of the benefits of being a subscriber besides the kick-ass mug that I got that says fake news you can trust?
Yeah, you know, there's a few different levels, but basically the number one thing is that everybody gets an ad-free experience on our site, so no ads, and they get our full-length podcasts. So we were able to launch a podcast with the subscriber revenue that we started up, and now, you know, there's a free version and then there's a paid version where you get, you know, I don't know, 50% more content or double the content depending on the episode. So the ad-free podcasts, ad-free full-length podcasts, ad-free experience. At certain levels, people can pitch in to throw ideas at us in terms of pitching headlines, which is there's a fun little private forum that people throw headlines around on. And that's almost an experience in itself, you know. It becomes a thing where we're trying to build a little community in there, you know, and that's something we may work on in the coming years, doing more general discussion. And in all the years I've been on the internet, the very best forum experiences for me have been like a paid forum, because everybody who's participating is throwing in, you know, $10 or $15 a month to be there, and nobody's going to be a real jerk, you know. Yeah. So that has been fun to kind of have that little gate where you really want to be involved in this, you know. And that's been fun. So that's one of the things. And we send people a gift depending on the level. Like there's a decal or a mug or a signed book, and so those are the main benefits. But yeah, really, we try to mostly pitch it as people supporting, because that seems to resonate with a lot of people. Like I support this, and I don't want Facebook to kill it.
Yeah. What kind of sense of humor did you have growing up? Were you the class clown? Were you? I
was voted class clown in high school, but I don't really know. I don't really remember being. I wasn't like the Bart Simpson of the class or anything. You know, I really wasn't. But I guess people thought I was funny. I don't know. But I loved very quirky, off the wall, dry humor. You know, and as I grew up and went into high school and stuff, I watched. The biggest impact on me was Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and This Is Spinal Tap. Those two movies, for me, it changed what comedy could be. Because up to that point, you know, as a family, we'd gather around and watch, you know, Home Improvement or Full House, and it was just this very canned, like, you know, joke set, you know, set up joke, you know, set up punchline. So to have this thing that was like, we're going to present a joke to you, but we're not going to wink at you and signal that it's a joke. You know, it's just there, and we're just going to throw it out there. You know, because that's how all those mockumentaries are. Monty Python's very dry like that. You know, there's no laugh track on the movie. And I think that, for me, and then, of course, obviously, I eventually encountered The Onion and stuff online. And that was that same brand of just dry humor. And that's really what drives a lot of the humor on the Bee. It's something that, if you and I are sitting there and we're talking about worship leaders in church, and I'm like, isn't it funny how worship leaders do this? You know, it's like you might chuckle, but to have like a news outlet that as though there's a news reporter sitting in your church, reporting on it. That in itself is funny to me. Like, why would there be a reporter in this situation? And that alone just is so much humor value to me, no matter how dumb the joke is. Like, just the fact, like why is there someone sitting here reporting on this? And that's what those mockumentaries did. Is there's a camera in this room. Why are they filming this? This is silly. And obviously, like The Office ran with that, and Parks and Recreation ran with that. But yeah, so those are definitely the inspiration for me.
Let me ask you. One of the things that I have noticed, especially with the really classic funny movies, like you mentioned Holy Grail, I showed it a few years ago to my boys, and they were, I don't know, probably 13 and 11 at the time. My 13-year-old thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And that's probably about the time that I first saw Holy Grail, was probably around 13, 14. Watching it with them, there were jokes that I didn't get in my teens, and I didn't get in my 20s. And heck, I didn't even get it probably the one or two times I've watched it in my 30s. But in my 40s, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so good. Did you ever experience that with that movie?
Well, so I did the same thing. I showed my 9 and 11-year-old the movie. And there's definitely... there was some joke that I just got, and I can't remember what it was. And I was... Which joke was it? I don't know, there was some joke in Holy Grail, and I thought about it. I was like, oh, that's what they're talking about. And I didn't get it until now, and I hadn't seen the movie in a few years. But yeah, my kids thought it was hilarious. Their favorite was the Black Knight.
The Black Knight and the Rabbit,
and the Rabbit. Those two scenes they're timeless. I mean, the absurdity of this. They didn't care for is the political peasants, the constitutional peasants. They didn't like them at all.
I didn't like that growing up either. But now that is probably one of the absolute funniest bits of that entire movie to me now.
Well, the idea, because you have to have a little bit of historical knowledge, right, to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody was thinking political thoughts at this time. They were trying to survive.
The violence inherent in the system.
And then this guy, the society wasn't prosperous enough for anyone to sit around and have political debates. It was just, I need to get
make your food. And make your clothes and whatever else.
Well, and there's an ongoing joke that it's not a punchline, but that the king is going around and he can't get anything done. Nobody's listening to him. And that's just very, very funny. And the kids don't get that's funny, that a king can't get anything done, and he's just going around. And with the first scene, he goes up and he's talking to the swallow, the two guys up on the wall talking about the swallow and the coconuts. And, he's just like, this king expects everybody to do everything, and they're just arguing with him about the coconuts. And then he goes on, and the constitutional peasants argue with him. And then he goes to the Black Knight, and they won't let him pass over this little bridge. And he could just go around, but he doesn't. He stands there and argues with this. It's so funny. It's just so good. Oh, the best punchline or the best bit in that Black Knight scene is when my kids died at was when he's fighting the Green Knight, and all of a sudden they're like doing a sword fight, and then it just cuts over and he's charging in with an axe.
Yeah.
It's like, where did that axe come from? Like, the cut is so like, where did he get that? And my kids died. Like, where did he get the axe? And so we had to watch that scene 3 or 4 times in a row.
So what are the plans for the Bee? What do you guys want to do? Where do you guys want to take it?
Well, we have a meeting about that tomorrow, so I'll tell you after that. But we've got a lot of ideas. We'd love to expand into video content. That would be awesome. We have a lot of ideas for video content, scripts written for video content, but it's a different space, And most video content now it's not our brand of humor. It's, like I said before, it's that winking at the camera. Mm-hmm. All Christian comedy is like that. Like, isn't this funny? This is a joke. You get it? Like, this is a joke about worship leaders.
Yeah.
Do you get it? And it's very obvious that it's parody, where our site gets all of its humor from the dryness, or most of its humor from the dryness. So we have to find a way to do that. And one thing we noticed is that The Onion is they've backed off of video content a lot. So it may not be profitable to do like that dry kind of news satire. I don't know if people consume that as readily on the internet, so it's hard to figure out what direction to go. We have some ideas that work. Yeah, the other weird thing about video content is, like with The Onion, they're doing like news broadcasts in video format. but nobody watches news broadcasts anymore, like at least not on the level that they used to. Mm-hmm. So you're parodying this form of entertainment that doesn't exist anymore, and it's weird. So what we basically want to do is look at what video content is like on the internet now, and what do people watch, and then we'll make our B version of that. So the main thing that people do is like those now this videos, 60 seconds of this little news briefing, or with the captions coming up on it, or something that's like a super inspiring, whatever somebody did that's super inspiring. So that's stuff that we can probably make a good parody of that doesn't talk down to you and say, hey, this is a joke, but it just presents itself very straight. So that's the kind of video content we're looking at, stuff that makes sense for the B. We're also working on a best of book, which is we haven't really officially announced yet, but Ethan has been spending most of his time, he's doing that right now actually, photoshopping. He's redoing all of our old photoshops.
Yeah.
Because he's got Photoshop skills and me and Adam didn't, and he's putting them in a higher resolution. So we're hoping that it'll be a lot of fun for people to look back at the first few years of the Babylon Bee, from fresh eyes. And we're going to put a lot of fresh new content in there too. Beautiful big book. We're trying to make it look like a Bible, like this leather. We're trying to get the fake leather cover with the bookmark and the gold embossing on the cover. So the best of the Babylon Bee. So that'll probably come out next year. We're going to work on how to promote that and stuff.
You having fun?
Having a lot of fun. It's interesting though, because no matter what you're doing in life, you'll manage to find the negativity and the stress and the anxiety about it. It's like I can sit there and go, oh man, I haven't thought of a funny joke today. This is horrible. Why did I ever quit my construction job? Yeah. That's the kind of stuff that goes through your head, and you're like, I don't know, you always have the imposter syndrome of like, I'm not. The Onion has a funny article that's like, report, today's the day they all find out you're a fraud. And I have it bookmarked because I love that article. It's that idea of imposter syndrome, that any day they're going to figure out, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just a construction guy that started writing jokes just because, So you always manage to find that negativity, and I think the key really is to back away and gain some perspective and be like, hey, I'm writing jokes on the internet for a living. That's pretty dang cool, especially compared to how stressed out I used to be. So,
you ever struggle with the opposite in getting too full of yourself? And what do you have to kind of help keep you?
No, I don't. No, I'm just I would say the biggest struggle is like, I've talked about this with people and, trying to keep the perspective and keep me having a healthy view of what it is I do and who I am in this piece. Because it's easy to look at myself and say, oh, I'm writing, I wrote 20 articles this week and they did this well,
Yeah.
And instead of saying like instead of looking at the impacts of what we're doing and not necessarily who was involved. So like, I have to check myself and say, it's not about me, it's about, this is really just a human thing, but
yeah.
I would love the Babylon Bee to be thriving 50 years from now, and not be, and that's the genius of the Babylon Bee, is that it's not a person, it's not about me, it doesn't matter who I am, if I die.
It wasn't until the podcast that I found out that, hey, there are these guys, Ethan and Kyle, that are...
Right. And even that we were really skeptical of doing, because Christian celebrity is like a horrible thing, and so we still don't really want it to be Kyle and Ethan. We do that for the podcast, but it's really Ethan and I should be able to move on, or or whatever, or Ethan will die of cancer from all the cigars he smokes, and then hopefully we've built up enough good writers and enough support for the Bee that would continue on beyond us. You see these Christian celebrities who fall into sin and fall away, and just go off into crazy land or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm not immune from that temptation or that desire, or that pitfall, right? So we want it to be where, let's say one of us stumbles or one of us leaves the faith or something crazy, like the Babylon Bee can continue beyond that, because I can't think of a Christian property that's been created that doesn't depend on like people, that doesn't depend on like this celebrity or this guy. And we're so obsessed with that in Christian culture, so it's nice to see that the Babylon Bee is not us, and we don't want. So that's the biggest thing for Pride is that for me is to say I'm the Babylon Bee guy, and it's like not. I don't know. I think the Babylon Bee goes way beyond me, and it's not me. I write a lot of the stuff, but hopefully we're creating a brand that people can latch onto and beyond just me and Ethan.
Is there anything looking back at some of your older articles that you're like, you look back and you're like, you almost cringe because you're like, ooh, I think I crossed a line and being mean with that?
Well, the first example of that was, again, we didn't really get. Like you said, you discovered the bee in May 2016. When people started to discover it, they started to feel like it had been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I
was surprised to find out how new it was when I found out about it, because I clicked like and I started following and I go through the website and look at old articles and I'm like, oh, this is relatively new.
Yeah, so the weird danger in that situation was we didn't really know how much of an impact we were having and how big the reach was.
Yeah.
And how much people already thought of this as like a core Christian page and institution. And it's like, we're just guys writing what we wanted to write or whatever. And we didn't really get the broadness of it already, And so I think it was in May, we did that article about Jan Crouch when she died. It was the day she died. She was the prosperity gospel. Obviously I think her theology was evil and dangerous. And so we wrote an article the day she died. And it wasn't really about her. It was about... We said all the other prosperity gospel preachers were puzzled. How could someone die when you can just claim health for yourself? Yeah. You can just claim healing for yourself. So we tried to focus this on other people, but it was like immediate backlash. We were on Fox News the next day, like Christian site, makes fun of preacher who died. It's like, oh my gosh. So we didn't get there are lines. I mean, we knew there were lines, obviously, but we didn't get that it's not a guy just mouthing off on Twitter. It's like people saw this as they already had claimed it as their own, as one of their own. This is a Christian. I didn't realize
you guys were on Fox News about that.
Yeah, it was like Adam texted me the next morning, "Hey, we're on Fox News," and I'm like, we left the article up. We didn't, apologize because I don't know that anything was necessarily wrong with it, other than there could have been more circumspection, up front, and saying,
is this the right time for this?
Is this the right time? And are more people going to be offended and hurt than are going to actually learn something from this? Because we're trying to communicate truth. We're trying to say, if you really believe that God, you can just claim healing from God at any time, then why do people die? Why do people get sick? It's an extreme inconsistency in that philosophy. You look at someone like Bill Johnson with Bethel who wears glasses, and tells people to claim healing, and you can claim healing anytime, and you're like, well, then why are you wearing glasses? There's inconsistencies like this throughout the prosperity gospel movement, and so we think it's a very important message, and we think we communicated it well. The only problem was it's like, hey, there's actually real people involved in this. There's a family that's grieving over this woman who just died. There's a lot of people who liked her that were grieving. And guess what? Nobody's mind was going to be changed by this satire article, right? Because nobody was actually going to think deeper about it because they were too offended. Mm-hmm. So it's like so now when we have to deal with stuff like that, it's more like, how do you communicate that without stepping on those toes, so that if the outrage is louder than the point you're making, then it's not worth it.
Ooh, that's wise. That's really wise.
No, it's not wise. Don't tell me that. It's the pride. Now the pride is coming and... No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's a good point for people to realize that when we're talking with people, when we're conversing with people, when we're having either in-person conversations or social media conversations, to try to not to be wary and aware of those areas in someone's life that they may be a little more sensitive to, where if you step on their toe, they're not going to hear everything else you say. All they're going to be focused on is this thing that you said that triggered, if you will.
Yeah, that's the whole triggered culture. Like, I triggered you, haha. It's like, well, you didn't convince anybody. You didn't change anybody's mind, People will always cite, like, Jesus or the prophets. Like, look, they were very harsh, and they used satire and they used humor. And I agree with that. But Jesus was also very wise about when he did it.
And who he did it to. I mean, all the times that he rebuked were either demons the religious leaders or his disciples. Mm-hmm. He never rebuked the sinner that came to him that was, pouring out the oil on his head and feet, or, the woman with the blood issue that just grabbed a hold of his garment just to get that healing.
Well, when we look at Jesus being very careful, knowing that he's going to be crucified in 3 years, right? And being very careful at the outrage that he generates. He knows he's going to generate outrage, but he goes, I'm going to only inject this at certain times, and almost planning the last week of his life, like being very careful. And we see he retreats, he runs away, slips through the crowd.
Or generates the outrage to the religious leaders and then just slips away.
Yeah.
Doesn't keep it going, doesn't keep poking the bear to the point where the bear, he just agitates the bear a little bit and walks away.
Right. I mean, this might be tangential, but we see Jesus as, floating through life, and he's got this appointment with the cross, and he just, it's coming up, whenever the Holy Spirit does it, whenever God orchestrates it, the cross is going to come. But he was actually very aware of the cross, and he knew, I'm not going to get caught by this massive crowd, this massive mob, too soon. I know when it has to be, and I'm building up to that point, because he was a man. He was 100% man as well as 100% God, so I think he was very cautious about how he approached things. So we try to follow that model, I think. You take your shots, but you pick them very carefully,
So how has your faith matured since you've been writing for the Bee? I once heard someone say, if you're not growing, you're just staying the same, and that's really not the whole point of life.
It's been a weird time for me just because, I won't go into all the details, but I was more involved in my church down in San Diego. I moved up here to write for the Babylon Bee, basically. It's kind of a long story, but I moved up back home, so that we could kind of simplify, and I was serving kind of as a co-pastor down in San Diego.
Yeah.
And so I moved up here and said, I'm going to do Bee full-time, that's what I'm going to do. And it's been a little struggle for us to get plugged into a church, And so because of that, it's been hard for us. It's not that my spiritual life is struggling, but that the struggle has shifted into a different area, because now it's if you've ever served in a church or pastored in a church and then you're not, it's a weird, I'm having to accept, I think, that a lot of the Christian life is just ordinary faithfulness of getting my family to church on Sunday, and talking with my boys when they have questions, And it's weird because our culture pushes young men, I think, it's hey, you have a long beard and you wear flannel, you should be a pastor, you're interested in theology, you should be a pastor, And, not that that's great that a lot of people want to do that, but I think we de-emphasize that, we want the excitement of planting a new church and getting hundreds of people to come, and that's great, but so much of the Christian life is just remaining faithful to the gospel and remaining faithful to the family that God's given you, So,
do you think this move from San Diego up to this area, Rancho, Ontario, Inland Empire, it allowed you to be there more for your kids? Has it allowed you to be around them more?
Yeah, that's been and that's its own struggle, because if you're working, I work at home most of the time, and if you're working at home, it's you're with your family more, but are you really there, and how do you say, okay, I'm done working now, and now I'm here,
Yeah.
Because I'll write articles all day with my 3-year-old on my lap, and that's great, but it's how much am I really there, Where's my mind, is it somewhere else? And also going from a job I hated to a job I love, it has kind of made that problem worse, because it's
because you want to do it more?
I want to do it. And before, I hated my job, but at 5 o'clock, I was done, And I unplugged, and I turned off my phone, and I didn't talk to anybody about my job. And I tried to get my job off my mind, as much as possible. And now it's I want to think about, what am I working on? What am I writing right now? What am I, So that struggle has been, I think, more pronounced working from home and working at a job that I love, But overall, it has been a net positive, I think, because, before I was sometimes working late, I would get up when it was dark and I would get home when it was dark, and, how much of your family are you even seeing at that point, So that was a tough season, but I think now just being able to see my family more. I think also it's a perspective that I have to count the blessings of, like, again, those stresses of, like, oh, I haven't told a funny joke today, I'm a failure, versus going, hey, yeah, my life is very, very good,
How do you handle those creative blocks?
The creativity is weird because Stephen King talks about creativity as, like, you're sitting there, and he calls them, like, the workers in your basement, and he says, you're just sitting there, and you send these workers down to your basement, which is all the things you know, and all the pop culture references you have, and all the words or whatever. And then they come back up, with 2 boxes and say, here you go, and 2 ideas married together. And it's like, I don't know, whatever I'm telling a joke about today, it's like Donald Trump and Christmas trees. And you're like, what am I supposed to do with that? And you just go back and get something else, and they come back with it. So you can't force it, right? You can't force it. So I think trying to do it is worse than just sitting there and waiting for the workers to bring you something good.
Do you do anything particular to kind of unplug, or like go out for walks, or?
I'll do runs. I'll go out for runs. I'll go work somewhere else. I don't know if it helps that much. Like I think my brain has been trained. Like when I'm sitting at my work computer and I got my headphones on and I'm staring, that's when I'm most creative, I think.
What are you listening to when you got the headphones on?
I'm a 90s Christian kid, so I listen to like Five Iron Frenzy, ska band, MXPX, the old used to be Christian punk band, stuff like that. Switchfoot was a muse of mine.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. I don't know. Heavy metal. I love heavy metal.
What kinds?
Iron Maiden, Megadeth, Black Sabbath. This isn't going public, right? This isn't going on the films. But yeah, no, I have tons of heavy metal records I love, and so that kind of stuff. It just, I think when I know that some people can't write with music with lyrics.
Right? I'm that way. Where I'll listen to either Brain FM, which is it uses binaural beats to help get your brain into a focused state or to a relaxed state. I use it for sleep. My sleep is increased by about an average of 3 to 5%. Or listen to maybe like a Spotify focus playlist or a classical playlist. I'm one that my brain I can't listen to lyrics.
Yeah, no, if I know the record well enough, it's like it's background noise anyway because I know it. It's not. I'm not listening to the words really.
I'm always fascinated with the different ways in which creatives create and the different environments that they put around them. Because I worked for Dr. Dobson for 15 years, and when he was writing, he would have the TV on blaring right next to him, and I'm like, 1, the visual would distract me, and 2, what they're saying would distract me.
Yeah, Stephen King also, he wrote about the myth of the writer going to the middle of the woods and getting inspired, and like you sit in the cabin and it's like I got writer's block, so I'm going to go to a cabin in the woods for a month, and he's like, now you're in the middle of the woods with no ideas. You have the same no ideas that you had at home. And I think there is something where I think the pressures and the stress of me sitting there going, I need to have an article up in a half hour and I don't have any ideas. Like that drives me to come up with
Really? You guys
ideas.
have those kinds of deadlines?
Well, not really deadlines. It's just my personal. That's what I put too much stress on myself because I go, I need to have an article up.
Yeah.
And it's just like Seth, when he bought the Bee, gave us no editorial restrictions, no deadlines, no guidelines whatsoever. It's just evolved into what it is. Yeah. So I try to write about 6 articles a day. We put them up around, basically every hour for a few hours, 6 hours or whatever in the middle of the day. Throw up a few reposts, and that's the day. And so that's just kind of what it's turned into. That seems to be the optimal. That gives us a good mix of Christian jokes, political jokes, everyday life jokes. And it seems to be about right. I think more than that, we might be trying too hard to get an idea. Less than that, it doesn't feel right to me. It's like I have to get. If I get less than that up in a day, I'm like, I'm twitching. I got to get an idea. It's just how it is.
Kyle Mann, Editor-In-Chief of the Babylon Bee. Let's get to rapid fire questions. Hey everyone, before we get to Kyle's rapid fire segment, I just want to say, if you love the Babylon Bee, please consider becoming a subscriber. After my interview with Ethan Nicole in October, I did, and I feel a great sense of pride in supporting an organization that brings me so much joy and laughter in my Facebook feed. You can go to babylonbee.com/plans. That's babylonbee.com/plans. And if you love what Holy Smokes is doing, please consider a year-end tax-deductible donation. PayPal.me/Holy Smokes Club. The link is in the show notes. PayPal.me/Holy Smokes Club. Rapid fire. Fire. Cigars or pipe?
Cigars.
First cigar experience. When did you start to get into it?
Right after we got married, about 6 months after we got married, 2007. Me and a buddy, hey, we should smoke a cigar. Got sick, that whole thing.
What brought you back then? If you got sick?
It was the community. It was not really. I didn't join any cigar clubs or anything, but being able to hang out and play poker, and there's something cool about just being there and not having to. Everywhere you go, you're expected to buy something, or you're expected to do something, or to just. I'm just sitting here. There's something cool about that.
Favorite drink, liquid pairing with your cigar?
West Coast IPA, maybe something with a little fruit in it, grapefruit sculpin, something like that.
Best dollar for dollar smoke?
Smoke?
Yeah.
Something from Romeo y Julieta or this Brick House.
Your splurge cigar. Something big just happened.
I don't know enough about cigars, so I would probably, I'd be the guy that goes in and says, "Give me your best cigar, sir."
Your go-to place to get smokes?
Here, Culebra.
Culebra Cigar Company in Ontario, California, right across the street from the mall, Ontario Mills. I love this place. This is such a great location.
It's the best environment. It's got nice chairs. It's just. We also would go a lot to Pacific Wine Merchants in Upland, California. That's an outdoor patio, which is a little different of a vibe. And there's also a giant train that goes by it. So that wasn't great for working, but Culebra usually. My friend Matt co-owns the place, and it's a great place.
Most memorable cigar experience?
I guess probably in that first year or two when we were doing it a lot. That whole time was just fun because we were new. Me and my wife were newly married, and we had a few newly married friends, and it was a whole experience of going, I am my own person, and, I am an adult now, and I have, we're living in an 800 square foot apartment, but I have this little patio area, this is mine, so that whole year of experiences is all very nostalgic for me.
Marvel or DC?
Probably DC, though I do like Marvel. DC has Batman, and no Marvel character comes anywhere close to Batman. DC's struggled a little bit on the movies, but I don't think they're as bad as people seem to think they are.
Yeah.
People want DC movies to be Marvel movies. Why would you want that? There are already Marvel movies.
Yeah.
So I think Ben Affleck as Batman was great. I thought Justice League was pretty good. I liked Batman vs. Superman despite the weird editing decisions, and the Dark Knight trilogy was good. I didn't like the middle film as much as everybody else does, but Batman. I got a lot of Batman comics. I love Batman. So,
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars. Disney's obviously stumbled a lot with their handling of the franchise, and the prequels I can't stand.
Which, by the way, you and I were talking before we recorded. I said one of the best articles that you guys have put out. You just put out like earlier this week, I think. It was that Disney puts The Mandalorian is trying to keep Baby Yoda from Rian Johnson, who's going to screw it up.
Yeah. Well, it's the greatest villain in The Mandalorian so far, really. I didn't hate Last Jedi as much as everybody else did. I thought it was pretty good. I think it's a very well-made movie that just had some very bad story beats that undermined a lot of things in the franchise. So.
Dogs, cats, neither? Both?
We have cats. We're not dog people. I don't really care for either, but my wife is turning our home into a cat sanctuary.
Nickname growing up or in college?
I always tried to get my middle initial is C, so I wanted people to call me KC. Never worked. So I didn't really have any nicknames.
KC. What's one unusual fact that few people know about you?
Well, we'll talk a little bit about the heavy metal thing we were talking about earlier. I was a huge metalhead for a good decade, and after I got married, I had never listened to heavy metal, or I only listened to Christian music, basically.
Yeah.
And my wife was like a Metallica fan, and she shows me some Metallica, and I'm like, wow, you know, I was such a huge metalhead. I own hundreds of heavy metal vinyls, and I went and saw Ronnie James Dio with Black Sabbath, or they were called Heaven and Hell at the time, but with the Black Sabbath crew. I saw him twice. I won radio contests. I called into the local radio station, and I won backstage passes to Ronnie James Dio twice. So I got to go to see Black Sabbath's rehearsal, and it was just me and like 50 other people in this intimate little room with Black Sabbath playing, and that was like 8 months before Ronnie James Dio passed away of stomach cancer. And so I have his autograph on all my Black Sabbath records, and it was an incredible thing.
Favorite book not titled the Holy Bible?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings? What's the best type of cheese?
I love going to if you drive up California, there's a bunch of dairies. I think it's up to 99. It might be up to 5, but I think it's up to 99. There's like several dairies as you go up, and I love stopping there, and we just get like the sampler.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what the names are, but we feel very cultured, like we're getting it's probably just mass market cheese, but
if you were arrested with no explanation, what would your family and friends think you had done?
Oh man, I assume that my wife is always saying that I'm going to get nailed for like making fun of Hillary Clinton, you know, and that she'll send her people after me. So I think they would assume that I got on the wrong side of the deep state.
All right, last two. If you were to have a holy smoke with any 3 people throughout history, who would they be, living or deceased? Can't name Jesus.
I would probably go with J.R.R. Tolkien. Just picking his brain on story and Middle-earth would be incredible.
Yeah.
So J.R.R. Tolkien for sure. Maybe Spurgeon. I've devoured a lot of Spurgeon, and we were doing some sermons on the Psalms, and his commentaries on the Psalms are still some of the best, and I'd love to chat with him. He had some really cool views on war and politics that I think get downplayed because people just look at his theology stuff, so I would love to chat with him about that kind of stuff. And then maybe something off the wall, I'd talk with somebody like H.P. Lovecraft, possibly.
Who's that?
He wrote The Call of Cthulhu and The Mountains of Madness, and he wrote all these horror novels in the 1920s.
Okay.
And he's basically the father of modern horror, and he was very disturbed and very nihilistic, and he was a hardcore atheist. And all the horror from his work comes because he believed that the universe had nothing to offer and that mankind was hopeless. And so a lot of modern horror still draws from him, because he basically said humanity is a speck floating on a disc, and his whole thing was, if you could see how meaningless your existence was, you would kill yourself. And that was the horror of all his works, was people would it was always personified in monsters, but people would look back at this monster, and he would never describe the monster. He would just have a black shape or something, or someone would look back and then they would go insane, and that was his. But he was very disturbed, and I would love to kind of pick his brain on, he was depressed his whole life, he was penniless, he was selling his stories to little sci-fi mags and that, and now he's super famous. Every horror writer owes a huge debt to him, and I'd love to just chat with him.
How'd you get into that?
I don't really know, but actually I had a friend that was a pastor at a previous church down in San Diego, and he used to play an RPG, a tabletop Dungeons and Dragons style game called Call of Cthulhu, and it was based on H.P. Lovecraft. And he says, "Hey, have you ever read Lovecraft?" I'm like, "No." So I started downloading his short stories and reading them, and now I've got the whole collection. And
that's awesome that a pastor was the one that introduced you to it.
Really interesting guy. He actually showed me all his from the 1980s. He's got hundreds of painted miniatures of all the H.P. Lovecraft monsters and stuff, and it was where did this? He was a doctor of archaeology of the Old Testament, but he had H.P. Lovecraft figures, so that's where that came from. I don't know.
All right, last question. if we were meeting 1 year from today and I got a bottle of champagne, what are we celebrating?
Google buying the Babylon Bee for $1 billion. No, I'm mostly kidding, but yeah, I would love to see the Babylon Bee just go to that next level where, we've either doubled or tripled our subscriber base, and something where, because we're at this strange transition right now where it's a business in a garage, and now it's a real thing. Now we have infrastructure, now we have support, now we have a CEO and, all this stuff. And so I'd love to be able to point at this and say, this is now like a thriving thing, And it is thriving, but I'd love to see it go to that next level. So if I had to say something concrete, I'd say double our subscriber base would be awesome.
All right, Holy Smokers. You heard me say I am a subscriber and a proud subscriber of what these guys are doing. I freaking love them, and I especially love the fact that you and Ethan are cigar guys. And so just go to the website, babylonbee.com, and it's what, subscribe? I think it's plans. Plans?
Yeah.
babylonbee.com/plans, and there you can take a look at the various ways in which you can support. You can support monthly, you can support yearly, which is what I did, and get a freaking awesome mug if you do the $100 a year plan. Babylon Bee logo on the other side says "Fake News You Can Trust." It's up in my office. It's one of those mugs I'm very proud of having, and let's see these guys go to this next level, because you guys also have a legal battle going with Snopes right now, right?
It's quieted down a bit, but yeah, we did have legal back and forth with them because we wrote an article that we had said that Georgia lawmaker who had said that the guy told her to go back to her country.
Yeah.
But she had made up the whole thing or whatever. We said that she went to Chick-fil-A and they said, "My pleasure," and she's like, "What do you mean, go back to my country?" And Snopes fact-checked it and basically labeled us fake news, labeled us junk news, said we're trying to deceive people. And so the real concern was that social networks would label us that fake news, which Snopes has done and Facebook has done in the past. So they eventually kind of backed off that after they started to lose that internet war, but and we got a lot of subscribers and support out of it. So, what Snopes intended for evil.
Well, I mean, there's a real concern on the part of legitimate fake news sites claiming that they're satire, but not really labeling themselves as much. I mean, I see friends share these most outlandish articles that they think are true, whereas you guys at the Bee are very open about, hey, we're just doing this to poke fun at people.
Yeah, and Facebook kind of washed their hands of it and said, oh, well, we can't tell. We can't tell the difference between those fake news sites and the real satire sites, so we'll just label you all. They call it labeled satire, which is weird. There's a huge difference between the sites that make up a story to generate outrage and get clicks, and then us, who clearly tells a joke and makes a point with our pieces.
So, holy smokes, let's get out there. Let's help them to double their subscriber base and take the Bee to the next level. So that way, when you guys have that planning meeting tomorrow, you guys can start to figure out what and have the resources to be able to go into those next areas that you want to go. So, Kyle Mann, Editor-in-Chief of the Babylon Bee, thanks for being on the Holy Smokes podcast,
thanks
brother.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Holy Smokes community.
Right, the family. Put me in that private group, man.